Was Martin Luther King Jr. really a hero? I suppose that's largely a subjective question, but I think it's an important one to consider and discuss. I'm a big believer that the word hero should be used far more sparingly than it is, so I tend to set that bar pretty high. Now, let's face it, a lot of people say MLK was a hero because they know that's what you're supposed to say, and saying anything else just makes you sound racist. But are there good reasons that people can articulate to place him in this lofty category? Should we consider Dr. King a hero because he gave inspirational speeches about important matters? I don't think so. I can think of a few other folks who have been great speakers, but that doesn't make them heroic. Should we consider the Reverend King a hero because he was a civil rights leader? Again, I don't think that's enough. There are some civil rights leaders out there today that I don't even like. Maybe we should consider him a hero because he won a Nobel Peace Prize. Nah, Al Gore won one of those, and I consider him something of a knucklehead. Sorry, Al, if you're listening. Now, let me stop leading you on and be straightforward. Speaking for myself, I do believe the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a hero and should be a source of great pride for all Americans. It was more than his beliefs and his speeches, but his consistent actions throughout his life that elevate him to that level in my book. To begin with, what many people don't know is that Dr. King, upon completing his education, had opportunities to stay in the American North and enjoy a prestigious and comfortable career as an academic. Instead, he decided he needed to return to the South because that is where the battle for civil rights needed to be fought. Returning to the Jim Crow state of Alabama, life was far less safe. He would face violence and dehumanizing behavior on a nearly daily basis. And this was not only true for himself, but for his family as well. Yet he went. In this respect, he was just like some of my other heroes. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who chose to return to Nazi Germany during the war years, and Jose Rizal, who returned to the Philippines when revolution against the Spanish was bubbling to the surface. Both of them had comfortable places to live abroad, but they went home. Both, incidentally, were executed by the respective regimes they chose to live under and speak out against. King's choice and his eventual martyrdom were not that much different. Living in the American South, King took on a leadership role as a young man in fighting against the ubiquitous injustices that Blacks faced. I think for many of us, the level of abuses that Blacks faced there in the 50s and 60s was far worse than we recognize. Yet King put himself out there as a spokesman, a symbol, and a leader, knowing full well what dangers he placed himself and his family in. He lived what he preached, quite literally. In 1967, in a sermon he gave at Ebenezer Baptist Church, he declared, "I say to you this morning that if you have never found something so dear and so precious to you that you will die for it, then you aren't fit to live." And this was not abstract for him. It wasn't metaphorical. His home was bombed twice. He was attacked and threatened on a regular basis, assaulted multiple times. He was arrested 29 times and was in and out of jail regularly. He knew very well that every day he went out in the streets, he could be gunned down. Yet he went. Beyond that, he was a man of great conviction. He committed himself to a particular ethical viewpoint and stuck with it, regardless of pressure from others to conform to a lesser ideal. When others within the civil rights movement challenged his stance of nonviolence, he refused to compromise. When people told him to stop speaking out against the Vietnam War because it was undermining his efforts on civil rights, he would have none of it. On some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? And vanity comes along and asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because conscience tells him it is right. In this, he echoed one of his own heroes and his namesake, Martin Luther, who reportedly said, "It is neither safe nor wise to do anything against conscience. Here I stand, I can do no other. God help me. When he and his family later moved to Chicago to live and work there fighting for housing rights, they moved into an apartment in the heart of the ghetto, in the slums. And that's where they lived, despite the difficulties. He and his family could have lived in a much more comfortable environment, but they didn't. He wanted to be with the people he was working to help, to understand their plight, to be one with them. That's impressive. Now, I'll be honest, I don't always agree with King on some of his ethical convictions. I don't share his exact ethic of violence, although I do embrace his interpretation of it in the civil rights struggle. I think his understanding of economics was poorly formed, his view of human nature too optimistic, and his marriage of the gospel with politics concerning. But he was a man who continually educated himself, sought to do the right thing, was self-critical, and listened to others. And so I can always respect that. There are other things that were truly remarkable about this man that I also greatly respect. He understood that America's founding fathers and the government they created were of tremendous value. He was proud to be an American. He believed in America. He just understood that Americans had failed to live up to the ideals they proclaim. He understood this was not a white thing, but a thing that white people had done. And so he was wary of substituting one form of bigotry for another. This was part of the reason he didn't like the term Black Power. And I wonder how many people actually know that. He cared deeply about those living in poverty, Black and white. He cared deeply about Vietnamese children half a world away. His was a vision for humanity, not just his own people or his own nation. It would have been easy for him to fall into tribalism, as so many did during his time, and so many still do today, but he rose above it. Also, unlike yours truly, he was exceptional in listening to competing voices and looking for the truth in both. Perhaps because of his reading of Hegel, he understood that by allowing both thesis and antithesis into a discussion, one can reach a transforming and progressive synthesis. Listening to one perspective alone is stifling. He could be self-critical and apologize for his own sins, both of commission and omission. He found inspiration for this in Gandhi, his chief strategist for methods of nonviolent resistance, writing, "Gandhi had the amazing capacity of self-criticism. This was true in individual life and his family life, and was true in his people's life. Gandhi criticized himself when he needed it, and whenever he made a mistake, he confessed it publicly." Now, none of this is to say that the Reverend King wasn't seriously flawed as a human being. Like the rest of us, he did things of which he would surely be ashamed, some serious things. But in lifting up heroes, we don't look for those who are perfect. Some overcame damning flaws. Some struggled with them throughout their lives, and some never faced up to them like they should have. But we don't cancel or erase these men and women. In learning the full extent of their lives, we gain a better understanding of what human beings are, and that having serious flaws does not exempt any of us from pursuing excellence and virtue in our lives. We as individuals and a society desperately need heroes, better heroes than what we typically find. People to emulate on the basis of what they did, not just what they said or posted on social media. People to inspire us with their humility, not their influence and affluence. People who make sacrifices. People who, as King understood it, take up their cross. We need men and women who rise to the level of what a hero really is. A person who voluntarily takes up a just cause despite its dangers and difficulties, and is willing to give everything he or she has to that cause. I believe King was one of those rare individuals. He inspires me. And today, Martin Luther King Jr. Day 2021 is a good day to reflect on who he was and what he did. Oh, and by the way, if you want to learn more about the man, let me suggest 2 books. Strength to Love, which isn't too big, it's easy to get through, and The Autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr. A little bigger, but very easy and good read. In the meantime, while you're waiting for Amazon to deliver those, go to YouTube, key up his "I Have a Dream" speech, and listen to it today. It's always worth your time. Thank you.